government document on design floods and recommendations on what design flood to choose. That document is fairly complex and deals a lot with risk assessment and statistics, but their recommendation for the base, if you don't want to do all the calculations and risk assessment and significant engineering, they recommend the 0.1% or the 1,000-year flood from the Atlas 14 study. Now, we did our Atlas 14 study at the 200-year flood. So FEMA is suggesting, without risk analysis and serious statistics, to go to the 1,000-year flood. But none of that is law at this point.
Okay, so either way, either option we choose, except for the removal, we wouldn't be current eventually with the new state regulations. That time is to be determined.
Right. If the state follows these recommendations, they would certainly raise the design flood.
Okay. All right, that's it for now. I'll have more later, but thank you both.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak?
Yes, thank you. Just to elaborate a little bit further on Mrs. Krause's questions, it seems that if we were to hold tight and not do any improvements and go with option one, then by the time these changes become law, does it make sense for us to then at that point decide how we're going to make the improvements to comply with the new regulations? And is there any, so if something is passed in the law, I'm assuming that there's a time period before, municipalities like us will have to comply. Do you know what kind of a window, like is there a certain number of years, because they can't expect dams to be brought up in very quickly? That would take a few years, I would think.
Yeah, I expect if when they do establish new standards, there will be some time window for compliance. There's some small possibility that certain dams would be grandfathered, and they'll probably start with the high risk dams. So we're one step below that. So we would be in a second round of required improvements, or in the second tier of rules. I do want to point out that if we do that approach, where we kind of hold steady and wait for the rules to come out, which has a lot of merit, we still need to do work on the dam. So we still need to look at that concrete and decide what maintenance or repairs are needed there. I don't think we're in a situation where we can comfortably say we can just let it sit for another 3 to 5 years while legislation works its way through. I think if we choose option one, or option one with a consideration to proceed as the regulations change, we still need to do that work, that $100,000 to $500,000 work.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you. And then the insurance. What are our insurance costs? Do you have that figure, and will it change?
I do have that figure. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I spoke with Meadowbrook, and they said that if we removed the dam, our liability insurance premium would not decrease. That is somehow essentially our dam liability policy is free. And I would love for somebody else to have that conversation and confirm that.
I think we're all in a little shock of how that is. What is it? What is our current premium?
That I don't know. So our liability policy is a broad umbrella for all liability of the city. So I don't have that figure.
And does that change when there's the legal requirements are updated, like we're expecting in the next couple of years?
That I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, it makes sense, but $0 doesn't make sense. So I'm not really really sure. Colleen might have some more experience with those policies.
City Manager O'Toole, do you care to comment on that at all?
I'm also confused why there would be no change to our policy with the removal of a large body of water, but at the same time, I do believe that as long as we're in compliance with state standards, there wouldn't be a reason necessarily to change our insurance premiums. And if there's a period of time in which we have to come into compliance, certainly that would all fall within the category of our umbrella policy. If we blatantly violated a state standard, that wouldn't be covered regardless of our insurance, so.
Okay. Thank you. What is our annual maintenance cost for the dam? Or maybe what it is over a 5-year period, because I think that would help looking at if we were to go with option 1, realizing that in the next several years we may have to increase the capacity and make those changes.
Yeah, I don't have a hard figure on that. I think the $10,000 estimate that Spicer included in their analysis is probably pretty close. On a year-to-year basis, most of the cost is operation of the dam. Sending people out after hours to operate the gates during storms, and having the police drive by during storms to kind of check on it for us, because there are 24-hour presence. Those are the basic costs. It's the interim costs. The last time we did maintenance on the gates, it was $130,000. That was 12 years ago. But that cost will happen again. We'll need to refurbish the gates again at some point, and it'll be $250,000 the next time. So on an annualized basis, the number is fairly small compared to these capital expenses.
Okay, that makes sense. So is you calculate like a depreciation on the concrete and the moving parts and all the different components, and is it pretty safe to say that those components with them breaking are pretty near the end of their economic life?
I would like to defer to Sean or Kevin on that one, but I think very clearly some of the concrete components are ready for preventive maintenance.
Yeah, just to add to it, on the solid concrete structure, sometimes we might stretch a design life out to 100 years, but all the steel, anything that can rust, you're talking 25 to 50-year design life, and they can get rehabbed, like it sounds like that happened 12 years ago, where you can, kind of grind the rust off, get some steel replaced, repaint them, and you continue to get life cycle out of them. But for all practical purposes, they're probably fully depreciated. And I'd say well over 70% of the dams I work on are beyond their design life, all the components. People don't have money to keep them, constantly replace Stainer gates and these big items. So I would guess, I don't know the details of when those gates were, the exact date they were installed and how many times they've been refurbished, but I'm sure they're near their end of their design life. And we can extend the life. That's usually what happens. Everybody keeps pushing them out to a point where they're, you got to call them that they're not safe and you have to replace them. Other than that, though, you don't really have a lot of pieces to the dam. It's concrete in the gates, which helps keep it simple. You don't have a lot of electrical monitoring equipment, which is short design lives, like might be 10 years for electrical equipment. So, but it's past this design life, most likely. And we just have to, look at it in more detail and see how we can extend that.
All right, thank you. It seems that option two, obviously we'd be, is a major increase in capacity and would make the maintenance repair items that option one, essentially that would be captured in option two, since it would all be increased. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I would say that's so, right, Kevin?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. Option two, a lot of basically it's all of the things that were in option one with the addition of creating more capacity by either lowering the spillway or providing more width for the spillway. So all of the costs included in option two are also rolled into, or sorry, all the costs in option one are also rolled into option two, because you'd still want to do the improvements to repairing the concrete, adding the telemetry and the level monitoring, et cetera. And then of course the annual maintenance costs.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. I will yield the floor.
Thank you. Councilmember Seal.
Thank you, Your Honor. A couple questions for you gentlemen from Spicer. When you talk about increasing the dam capacity in option two by increasing the spillway, but yet you say you'd have to lower the lake level. So in other words, the dam has more capacity to withstand, is that it? Increased flow coming across the dam?
So option two probably within itself could have a whole alternative analysis done on it, because there's a lot of different things that can happen. But there's really two major buckets. One is if you hold the current lake level and you want to maintain that, then your fixed pool is at a certain elevation. And to get extra hydraulic capacity, you're either going to add new spillway fixed gates or new movable gates, completely add new ones, or you could modify the fixed crest to be a movable, weir, could be another Teener gate. And every time when you're talking about a fixed elevation, you're holding it, to get that extra capacity, this is to get to actually a question that was brought up at the very beginning. On a Teener gate, you can get significant more capacity out of the bottom of that gate than you do over the top, because there's head on it. And we could run the math and probably answer the question that was asked earlier. So to maintain the level and get capacity in this current footprint, the only way you're really going to do that is to have some kind of movable gate or weir.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to have to add capacity outside of it. If you lower the level, that provides additional capacity by lowering the weir crest. Because in the end, I didn't mention this to begin with, you design for freeboard. So the max water surface elevation during a design storm is the freeboard is a distance from the top of the dam down to the water surface.
Right.
So a minimum you want a foot. Some people prefer to design for 2 feet, but ideally you're shooting for a minimum foot of freeboard. So when you hold the lake level, that working head is a lot shorter because the lake's higher. When you lower the level, you could put a lot more head on the same structure, or fixed crest weir, and therefore you get a lot more capacity out of it.
Okay. Let me ask this question then. Can you expand the length of the spillway by lowering one of those gates, making a different gate, making a gate that has a lower top level, but yet has a movable bottom level that's only a portion of the gate, so that you can open the bottom without raising the top? Because it seems to me it's almost counterproductive to raise the gate, because then you might cut off any spillover that's coming over the top of the gate, but yet you're allowing then water to come in through the bottom, although at a greater volume.
What I can say is it's significantly more water you can pass underneath. I mean, to the point where the little bit you lose over the top isn't a big deal. The reason the overspill on a lot of Teener radiator gates you have it is it helps you to kind of normalize the level of the lake.
Right.
So the more weir length you have that's fixed in place, the less variability is in the lake
Right.
going up and down during just normal spring events or typical small rainstorms. But when you really need to move a lot of water, opening the gate and getting that extra head pushing it and really dwarfs what goes over the top. So the little bit you lose, it's more than made up with the fact that you can run it underneath it. Now, saying that, there is different options. There's Tainer gates. You could leave a fixed crest spillway going over a sluice gate, for example. But the reason you see these radial Tainer gates on dams is they are the most efficient way to move water
Okay.
through a structure. That's why you see them everywhere.
What's the multiple of the amount of water that you can bring through the bottom of the gate when you raise it as opposed to spilling over the top? Do you know? Right offhand, rough?
It's easily probably a factor of 10, but it's really driven by the head on it. So if you just had a couple feet of head difference, probably less impact. If you got 10, 12 feet, it would take us probably give me a half hour and I could run the numbers for you and tell you. It's two different equations. It's really not that hard to get to, but
There's a multiple, is there not, of the water that you can pass under the bottom of the gate as compared to spilling over the top?
absolutely, yeah. What that
If I
multiple
can-
is, I'd have to calculate it, but it's so significant that I'm very comfortable saying that I wouldn't be afraid to lose that little bit of overtopping for what you get underneath the gates. That's why
Okay.
they're there. That's why they're designed that way, is so you can open them with head on them, which
Okay.
If I can add to that really quickly, the spillway capacity that we calculated for the dam inspection report is based on the assumption that the radial gates are lifted to the full 11 feet. So at that point, there's 11 feet of water passing underneath, or there's 11 feet for water to pass underneath those gates. And that was one of the driving forces behind us wanting to exercise those gates a few weeks ago, was to verify that that calculation was in fact correct, because it's based on that assumption. So that
Right.
would come in with that as well.
One other concept that I've heard a great deal about, maybe this question for you, Ms. O'Toole, is the whole concept of an unfunded mandate. If they change these laws on our existing dam, and now they require us to do an update, how much can we rely on the state to have to be responsible for funding those kinds of changes that we might have to institute as a result?
I think we can safely assume that they will not assume responsibility for those changes.
that
There may
unfunded
be some
mandates-
small grant program that comes with it sometimes, but it's unrealistic to think that
So unfunded mandates will continue.
it doesn't appear that way.
Okay.
There were other recommendations from the task force that dealt with financing. They did recommend a $20 million a year revolving loan fund. And some, I'm looking at, I don't actually see any grant money in there. Oh, no, $750,000 a year of grant money for removals and studying removals. So yeah, not much in the way of hard money. A number of the other recommendations that the task force made do involve money, our money. That as a dam owner, they have a whole number of recommendations in there that, dam owners should have an emergency fund for maintenance. They should have, a high level of liability insurance in case of failure. They should have some sort of funding available to mitigate losses in the event of a failure. So there are a lot of financial recommendations in there as well that whether they'll get passed or not, they will affect the economics of this decision.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. CO. Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. I do have a few questions that have not been asked yet. What is the potential for failure with correct and timely maintenance of our? I mean, a lot of dam failures are based on the fact that they were out of date, they had not been inspected, they had not been properly maintained. So if you are sort of following the rules and doing what is required, does that lower our chances of a failure?
Absolutely. Doing proper maintenance and like the test we just performed and staying ahead of steel and, concrete structural issues greatly reduces the chance of failure. The driving force of most of our dam is basically gravity. So that's not going anywhere. The thing, and I, like, want to hear Spicer's opinion on this as well. The thing that increases the risk on our dam is the changing weather, the increase in precipitation. So while we're meeting standards, I think we only had a couple hundred cubic feet per second of excess capacity. And just kind of casually, the number of events that have happened that have required wide openings of the gates has increased. And the number of times that folks have seen the lake level within that 1 foot of freeboard range, those have increased. So that's, I think, more of our risk factor that's much more difficult to assess versus the maintenance side of things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like Jeff said, we're close to the capacity of the dam with the Eagle provided flow rates. If you recall back to our Atlas 14 analysis, based on our rough calculations of what that increased flow would be with more recent rainfall data, you actually don't have the 1 foot of freeboard that Jeff and Sean had mentioned previously. So our expectation would be that at that theoretical form, the dam would still hold back the water, it wouldn't overtop, but you would be getting dangerously close to that point. And again, those are all based on theoretical numbers that, I mean, you got to start with something, so.
Thank you. My next question, Mr. Fordyce, what would be the impact of removing the dam on other communities?
I think it would be pretty minor. The dam has some kind of flow mitigating properties, because the pond level does rise during a big event. But it's not really designed as a flood control dam because it has that open spillway. And when, big storms come, we just open the gates and increase the flow rate. So in terms of flooding, I think it's pretty minimal. But again, I'd like to hear Sean or Kevin's thoughts on that.
I agree that it probably doesn't have a lot of attenuating flood control benefits downstream. There's a little, but pretty minor in the big picture. Probably the bigger thing would be managing just, if it's fully removed, you have to deal with the sediment transport and controlling that. That's a big factor in dam removals. And if you don't control it like it probably should be, then you could have some sediments moving downstream that affect aquatic life. Other than that, I agree it would be pretty minimal. If it was done right, the impacts would be pretty minor.
To be frank, I do have concerns about property owners that live along the body of water right now and removal of the dam and what that's going to do to their property values. In all transparency, I live on the street that borders the river. And I know there would be a lot of probably very confused and maybe unhappy homeowners to see that lake changed into a small stream. I think I would want to see what that would look like and how it would impact the surrounding real estate, as well as Mill Pond Park, if that dam were to be removed. And have we done, so I guess to piggyback on that, my question would be, have we done any models or studies as to what would happen if the dam were to be removed, Mr. Fordyce?
No, we have not. We wanted to have this meeting and see if there was any interest in that option at all before spending money to take a look at that.
Okay.
But that would be part of the next steps that Spicer has recommended, surveying, figuring out what the bottom looks like, figuring out how much sediment is there, and getting some idea of how much removal and sediment control we would have to do, and what it might look like without the dam and without the pond.
So I guess I will just kind of close with, Mr. Fordyce, correct me if I'm wrong, we really actually have to do option one at this point, correct? There is maintenance that needs to be done at this time. So we really have to do that as a first step. It's just whether or not we want to take our maintenance to the next level or explore removing the dam beyond that.
Yeah, and I think if we're looking at removing the dam, that would potentially impact, option one. There may be some, if option one is our only option, then we're doing 50 to 100-year design life stuff. If option three is our goal, then in our first round of maintenance, we're going to do 10 to 20-year lifetime stuff, which could reduce costs. It might not reduce it that much. So that's the end game. The long-term goal influences the shorter-term decisions in some cases. But yes, absolutely, there is work that has to be done, no matter which of these options we choose.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Dillon. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
Yeah, just a few questions. When you mentioned in the $100,000 to $500,000 maintenance issue that we probably need to do, of those items, how soon do they need to be done? And would they be done within the next year or two if we can manage that?
Ideally, I would think you would want to do those by 2023 when the next dam inspection report is due. But at the very least, I would recommend putting a plan in place to accomplish those items. Certainly, if you're considering seriously options 2 or 3, some of the recommendations might not be quite so critical. At the very least, I think you would want to do the structural analysis and possibly some concrete repairs to those walls. Something like level monitoring, telemetry, it's really up to you how comfortable you are with the monitoring system or the lack thereof being the way that it is right now. Obviously, it's been that way for a long time, so it's up to you if you feel that it's worth it to have that improvement for however long it's going to be before you proceed with options 2 or 3. Does that answer your question?
Yep, it does. To do an analysis to remove the dam, what would be the time period for that?
I'm going to let Sean answer that.
So removing them can get to be a very complicated thing. One of the first steps is, like Mr. Fordyce said, is, we're going to evaluate the bottom and the sediments. And if the sediments are silty, I'll just to use a general word, then they have the potential of having contaminants attached to them. So then you need to do contamination testing and determine if the soils are contaminated. If they aren't, there's a direction you head. If they are, obviously a different direction you head. And that's a kind of a slow, steady process. There's the to figure that out, because before you really can even move forward, you need to know that answer. And then from there, you're looking at conceptual work, maybe it's just like was mentioned, trying to do some renderings possibly so people can get a sense of what it looks like. The approach to sediment management, do you take it all out of the impoundment by dredging it up front? Do you do it during the drawdown? Do you let all the sediments migrate to the dam and bail them out at a sediment trap? There's a lot of different things to think through. So you're going to spend at least with my experience, it's ranged quite a bit, anywhere from a year to 3 years, probably just trying to figure out the best approach. Let alone the community component too. Like we've mentioned, there's historical value and the pond has the aesthetic value and properties value. So all that kind of works its way through the process. So it takes some time. Let's say
We're looking at probably a 3 to 5 year plan, even to assess that. So, okay, thank you. One of the things that I was considering asking a question about was whether or not the potential for funding could come from the state's revolving fund as we look towards the waste treatment plant upgrade, being the fact that I thought some of this was relevant to that, but looking at that potentially as maybe a source of funding, just a suggestion, a recommendation, if we can look into that. The other piece of it, I think where I'm looking at this from is the perspective of, like everything, eventually something's getting a risk to it. And in this case, we're talking about higher liability for a risk if a dam breaks. we're already talking about having to move a policy just for our own cyber concerns from 500,000 up to 5 million, if not more, because of the ability that could damage. We're getting to a point where there's so many factors in this that are starting to address issues that are environmental, the cost, the liability, that even for us to expand this to meet the needs of what potentially could be an environmental hazard is an ongoing cost. And when we're looking at $5 million and we can't even seem to fix our water and our sewers and some of the other things, at some point we're gonna have to make an assumption that this is not gonna be funded by the state. We may get some money to assess what's going on with it. So my hope is that we can look at fixing what we need to fix, the option 1, and then assessing in option 3. But I don't see how we're going to be able to afford not knowing what the state's requirements are going to be going forward. That potentially could be an open book to millions and millions of dollars. And the liability of it is just not something that, as a small community, we can continue to maintain. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. Councilmember Del Orco.
Thank you. In terms of looking at this from the perspective of narrowing down the 3 options, it's my understanding that both option 2 and option 3 would require some prerequisite evaluation and study and gathering of data, and option 1 would not. Is that correct?
There would,
Sorry, go ahead.
with option 1, there's the structural concrete analysis that needs to be done.
Okay, but it's fairly minor compared to what we would need to look at in both options 2 and 3.
Correct.
So if we determine through these discussions that option 1 really isn't sufficient in getting us where we'd need to be to stabilize the dam for a long period of time, then we would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone by looking at leaving both options 2 and 3 open, because a lot of whatever we're going to look at to evaluate those options is the same for both. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, to some extent, yes, definitely.
And in terms of thinking about this from a grant funding perspective, it appears to be the case that the most effective way to take advantage of the grant funding available is through removal of the dam, and that's because of its the state's looking at it from a risk mitigation perspective, correct?
I think that's correct, that they're looking to just eliminate these issues, since there are so many dams that don't have a productive function. The grant funding that I mentioned earlier was just a proposal from the task force. So,
Right.
But there are some existing state grant programs that have been used for dam removals. So.
Do we have a sense from surrounding communities such as Dexter that have gone through this process recently, what kind of offset or what kind of grant dollars we might be looking at as if we were to contemplate removing the dam?
I don't have that information at my fingertips. I know there were multiple parties involved in that removal, because the county road commission was involved, the village of Dexter was involved, and somehow I think DTE had a role in that one as well. So there were more groups paying into that than would be in our situation.
Yeah, we do have a citizen who is interested in seeing us pursue dam removal or consider dam removal, who provided some additional documentation. The Dexter Dam removal costs $1,240,000. The partners in that were the Village of Dexter, the Huron River Watershed Council, Michigan DNR, Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund, County Road Commission, and DTE. So probably assuming some combination of public funds and grant.
So they were able to cobble together grant funding sources from multiple agencies and offset their cost. You said the total cost was
$1,240,000.
But you don't know how much of that was?
I don't know who.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's still very helpful.
I can, just to add to that real quick, I'm not familiar with Dexter, but I can tell you on the dam removals I've been involved with, That is a very common scenario where there's multiple funding sources. The only one I didn't hear in there, sometimes we get money from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They also are involved with dam removals.
Right.
So that's a very common approach is multiple funding sources, all packaged together.
To pick up on that comment you just made, wildlife and refuge, the same concerned citizen that Ms. O'Toole just referenced sent an email to all of council back on August 9th espousing the potential benefit of restoring the river ecosystem, improving the water quality for the habitat and living organisms in the river. Do you feel that there is an added benefit to the quality of the Saline River itself by removal of the dam?
Well, I'm an engineer. I'll say that right out of the
Okay.
gate. So, what we normally do on these, though, I can tell you, is we work with, different sub-consultants that have expertise in fisheries and macroinvertebrates and the impacts. In general, I typically would say the answer is yes to that, but I'm stating it as an engineer.
I understand.
We would be happy to bring people like that on board if you don't already have somebody like that you're working with.
Okay, and one last final question. During the times that we've experienced storm surges and events of heavy rainfall, that invariably precipitates issues for us at our wastewater treatment plant in terms of the effluent not being able to take advantage of its gravity-fed drop into the Saline River. If we were to remove the dam, would that ameliorate or at least attenuate some of the issues that we experience with increased demand on processes at our wastewater treatment plant?
I'm not certain you'd see a big change in that. Like Mr. Forte said earlier, it's the dam here has some attenuating effects, and maybe during a storm there might be a slight increase in that elevation, but I don't think you're going to see much of a change, especially in the big ones. The big events just simply pass through the structures and on down. So it's probably going to act kind of similar since it's downstream of the dam.
Right, but it's so close, it really doesn't have to travel very far before it gets to where that effluent drop is. So that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, and I will say if the dam were to breach, I guess that, and fail, that's a completely different scenario and you would be significantly impacted. But in terms of with and without the dam, how the plant sees those flows, I'm not sure it'd be a significant difference.
Yeah, I raised the question because as we contemplate bonding close to $40 million to redesign our plant, I would hate to see all of that be for naught in the event of a catastrophic storm event where there was a breach of the dam and then we're finding ourselves one step forward and two steps back. All right, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Delorco. We have less than 5 minutes. Let me just state for the record that in my judgment, as we look 5 to 10 years out, we ought to be pursuing option one, doing some additional maintenance and repairs to the existing dam. I am of the opinion that as we as a community look 20 to 30 years out, we owe it to ourselves and our constituents to further evaluate option three, which would be removal of the dam. So those are my sentiments this evening. We will revisit this issue obviously in the future, but I will do a quick round robin just to see if there is consensus to begin at least a portion of option one, which is some additional maintenance to the dam. Councilmember Kraus, can I start with you?
Same as what you and Mr. Gearbout has said, 1 to 3.
Very good. Mr. Kamara Sulak?
I concur.
Okay. Mr. Seal?
I favor option one.
Okay. Ms. Dillon, you sort of already touched on this, but if you'd like to elaborate.
I do. I guess I'm just trying to understand, do we have things budgeted at this point? Is this something that we're looking to do now in a future budget year? Where are the dollars is just sort of what I'm looking at.
You want to address that, Ms. O'Toole?
Regarding current year's budgets, I think City Engineer Dais and I would have to look at, one, what the cost of these considerations will be, and two, then what plan we want to put in place for what fiscal year it hits. It sounds like the first step in this process is going to be that structural analysis. So certainly if we could get that completed this fiscal year and we have funds available for it, it's probably something we will recommend. But from there, we'll have a better idea of costs and timing for those other elements.
Fantastic, thank you very much.
The structural analysis is budgeted.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Gearba?
Just one real quick question. Our gates are functional, and so for immediate concerns right now, we don't have any, right?
Correct. We are fully compliant with all standards and everything is working.
Thank you. 1 and 3.
Okay, and Mr. Delorico?
I can get on board with executing option number 1 with an eye toward option 3 in the very near future.
Very good. Ms. O'Toole, why don't we do this, unless you object? Let's add dam repairs as a discussion item at the end of our regular meeting agenda on October 4th. Perhaps between now and then, you and staff can discuss this a little bit more and give us an update on how we can proceed with option 1 in the near future. Sound reasonable to you?
Sure, we can make that happen.
Very good. Thank you all. We appreciate our guest time this evening from the Spicer Group. We look forward to working with you. Mr. Fordyce, thank you for your leadership on this. And at this time, unless there's anything further, the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion to adjourn this work meeting at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Kraus, seconded by Gearbaugh. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. We will reconvene into regular session in 2 minutes. Twenty seconds. I would ask that you put, or you turn the ringers off on your phones or electronic devices. Please turn those to vibrate. I don't want any interruptions tonight. And with that, we will begin our regular session. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for joining us, and as always, there are copies of the agenda on the back table. We would encourage you to sign in, and there are also devices to assist with hearing on the back table as well, if you need one. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Council Members CO, Dillon, Delorico, Kamara, Sulek, Kraus, and Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. From City staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director Green. I don't believe Parks and Rec Director Scruggs is with us this evening. DPW Director Sherrills is with us, along with City Engineer Fordyce. At this time, the Chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended, noting that there is one additional item under new business. I believe it's item 21-175.
So moved as amended?
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh to approve as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, was that by Delorico? Thank you, sir. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. There are no absences, so we'll proceed to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. I'll defer to the city clerk first. Clerk Royal, did we receive any communication in advance of tonight's meeting? We did not. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who would care to speak to an enumerated agenda item, whether that's an action item under new business or something that is listed under discussion? The record will reflect there are no citizen comments. We proceed then to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Mayor Pro Tem Gearba, I'm going to defer to you because you were gracious enough to send an email to myself and the city manager in advance of tonight's meeting. Were there any other issues that you'd like removed from the consent agenda this evening?
Yes, I would like to remove C-21-179.
Very good. So C-21-179 will appear then as the last item under new business. With that, Mr. Gearba, would you make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Dillon. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 21-175, 2021 Bandit 12 XP Brush Clipper. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 15th, 2021 memo from DPW Director Searles and to approve or not to approve the purchase of a new 2021 Bandit 12 XP Brush Clipper from Bandit Industries in the amount of $38,008.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamir Sulak. DPW Director Searles, would you care to make a brief comment pertaining to your memo of September 15th? And then we'll open up for questions and subsequent to that discussion.
Good evening. The brush chipper that we're looking to purchase is of commercial grade, medium size, 12-inch opening. It's very ideal for our block pruning. That'll take, a much lower operating cost than the large one that we have. So we're going to use this one more on our scheduled work. And when we have a large tree that has to be removed, we have the larger brush chipper available. The larger chipper, it's a lot of maintenance time. So brush pruning, this gives us an efficiency that we don't have with the larger unit. And also gives us a little redundancy in the case of a storm.
Very good. Thank you, Director Searles. Are there questions for our DPW Director? Mr. Gearba, please.
I believe there was a question about, if I'm right on this, rebudgeting funds to support this?
Yes, I apologize for not making this memo proper. Not exactly the best at our
No problem.
process yet, but this is over budget, this purchase is, and what we were gonna do was, we did get a lower price than expected on our utility vehicle. We're gonna stay within that org, rework around our purchases out of that account so that we don't go over and have to come back and ask for more money.
Excellent, thank you.
Very good. Anything else, Mayor Pro Tem Gearba?
At this time.
Additional questions for our DPW Director? Discussion on the motion.
Just one quick question.
Mr. Kamir Sulak, please.
How long does a piece of equipment like this last, and what kind of a warranty do we get?
I did not read the warranty, but I do know from experience, I've seen these go for 20 years, properly maintained.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Any additional questions or discussion? The record will reflect there are none. Thank you, Director Searles. There is a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded by Kamir Sulak to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 21-177. This is Salt Springs Park Development Monroe Street Project. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 15th, 2021 memo from Engineer Fordyce and to approve an award or not to approve the construction of the Salt Springs Development and Monroe Street Sidewalk to Folsom Incorporated in the amount of $269,389.65.
Move to acknowledge?
Moved by Dillon to acknowledge. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kraus. Mr. Fordyce, will you provide some obligatory remarks regarding your memo of September the 15th? Then we'll open it up for questions.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So developing Salt Springs Park has been in the plans for a long time. It's reflected in the Parks and Rec master plan, and we developed a park-specific development master plan for Salt Springs shortly after it came into the parks program. The first step is making people able to get there. It's kind of landlocked by the wastewater treatment plant and some residential developments. So we've been looking for a way to get people into it, and a walkway kind of skirting the edge of the wastewater treatment plant, and then a parking lot at the entrance to the wastewater treatment plant were identified in all those plans as the best way to do that. We did some time ago have this project up for bid, and at that time we decided to back out and seek a grant, which we did receive, and in the amount of $75,000. During the kind of redesign and repackaging of that design, we ran into the issues identified during the phase 2 of the wastewater treatment plant expansion options, where there's contaminated soil in the area where this parking lot would go. So we took another step back and had those soils evaluated, found the soils involved in this project are non-hazardous yet contaminated, requiring special disposal, incorporated that into that required a little bit of a redesign of the parking lot so that we could definitively, create a barrier between our work and soils that haven't been touched. And then also identified that this would be a good time to connect this parking lot to the existing city sidewalk system, so that there is a pedestrian access to the park as well. The commercial property adjacent there has a site plan condition requiring that they help fund frontage sidewalk on their property. And we're working to get a grading easement from the private parcel to the north that also requires sidewalk expansion. And there are multiple funding sources for this. I forgot to mention, we also went out and got a Brownfield Grant that is currently at $50,000. We had initially asked for a little over 80. The Brownfield Committee suggested an award of 50 and then come back as we further identified our costs, which are adding up, I think, around $84,000 at the moment. So we will be returning to them to ask for more grant funds there. And we have identified $45,000 of available Metro funds to fund that sidewalk shortage.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Flores. Appreciate that overview. Are there, again, the motion on the floor is simply to acknowledge receipt, so I'm only interested in questions right now for Mr. Fordyce or anybody else on staff. So I'll open it up for questions. Mr. Gearbaugh, please.
Just a quick question. The funding for the sidewalk on Monroe Street, which you show as being linked, that is going to be paid by city dollars and not assessed to the private property owners as our standard practice for the city?
In my memo, in the chart there, you will see two lines. One is residential sidewalk assessment, and the other is commercial sidewalk site plan condition. Those are, one is an assessment, and the other one is collecting on a site plan condition.
Anything else, Mr. Gearbaugh? No. That's it. Additional questions? Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. So, Mr. Gearbaugh, Mr. Fordyce, my question for you is regarding, so the Metro funds, those are discretionary funds that we would be using. They're not necessarily just for this purpose.
Metro funds can be used for a variety of purposes. They are limited to expenditures within the right-of-way. So this project fits within their defined use.
Okay. Do we have to do both projects simultaneously?
I think there are some significant advantages. One being that we would At the same time, we're creating the vehicular access to the park. We would also have the pedestrian access to the park. I think doing, it's kind of a complete project at that point. The other factor that plays into it is the Brownfield Grant. I think it would be difficult, but not impossible, to go back at a later date to the Brownfield Authority and say, okay, now we're going to do another little bit in this spot that we, had on the table before, but pulled back from. So we've got that grant funding. We have the invitation to come back for more grant funding. I think this is an advantageous time to take advantage of that.
Okay, I appreciate that. My one concern right now is we're going to be putting in what I'll refer to as the Huntington Woods sidewalk on the west side. And then we would put in this sidewalk on the east side, but there is no crosswalk. And I'm very concerned that people are going to think that that is a safe crossing because you're going sidewalk to sidewalk when we do not have a clear crosswalk in that area. So either is there an opportunity to create a crosswalk in either of these projects to connect these sidewalks? I know we had talked at one point about having sidewalks continue across the Adient property. I don't know where that stands at this point. And so I'm just very concerned because the area in which the entrance to the wastewater treatment and obviously the access point to the Salt Spring parking lot is going to feel like a natural cross point for people. But I don't know if it's going to be the safest with cars traversing that area. There's already questions about speed and such.
Yeah, we don't have a firm plan for a crosswalk in that area yet. Scott Fisher from Midwestern is in the audience, and he kind of sketched out a concept for a mid-block crosswalk there, but the location of it requires Adient frontage sidewalk on the west side. There's really no way to put it at the end of the Huntington Woods sidewalk, at the north end of that sidewalk, and at the south end of what we're installing now. With the bridge there and the curve, there's just not a good line of sight at that spot. So it needs to go a little bit further north, kind of in the middle of the Adient property. So we do have a concept plan for that. We are in negotiations with Adient on some funding for this project that is on the agenda tonight, and continuing negotiations to have them install frontage sidewalk on their side. So it's an ongoing process. I can't say that it's definitive. It has, every part of it that I've been involved in has felt very promising that Adient was going to kind of fulfill that responsibility. So it's a near term, in the infrastructure scheme of things, a crosswalk in that vicinity is, I think, a fairly near-term item.
Okay, so would it be more beneficial to wait until we have a clearer picture from Adient of their contribution?
Again, I think with the, having a complete connection there to the existing city sidewalk network and taking advantage of the brownfield funding that we have available right now, I think that makes it time to do that sidewalk. Sidewalks, they always come together a little bit at a time. In a new subdivision, they're built one lot at a time. There's a master plan, so that they all kind of work together. Sidewalks along Michigan Avenue in the industrial park, those get installed as those lots are developed, so when GBA or whatever ends up going in there, they'll put in a sidewalk. One end of it will connect to the car wash. The other end might not connect to anything until something else happens, so that's just kind of the nature of sidewalk construction. It's a, per lot kind of process. And, the grades that we've set this sidewalk at, I think that will work very easily with installing a future ramp almost anywhere along it. Towards the north end of it, things get a little bit steeper. So, but closer to the parking lot, I think we have plenty of opportunities grade-wise with the current design to add in a ramp.
Okay. And do we currently have dollars budgeted for these projects? I guess, what is our overage that we're looking at using other dollars for?
In the projects that we're looking to award tonight,
Yes.
yes. So the Metro funds are there, the 45 plus for the sidewalk. And that doesn't impinge on the maintenance activities that Director Searles has planned for this budget year. So there's still Metro funds available to fund that as well. On the Salt Springs Park side, we have $85,000 of city money funded that, so we're 12 and a half over on that side at the moment. And hopefully City Manager O'Toole will be working some magic with Adient and getting to figure something like that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Dillon. I would be remiss. Does our guest from Midwest Consulting care to make a comment this evening? You don't have to, but I wanted to provide you the opportunity since you were gracious enough to attend tonight's meeting in person.
Good evening, Council. My name is Scott Fisher with Midwestern Consulting. Nice to see you all again. I second most of what Jeff said. As far as splitting the projects, it absolutely could be split. It's, as Jeff said, it's certainly easier, especially when dealing with the contaminated soils, to do it all at once, get it done, get it out of the way. Soils can, of course, always get worse over time. So this gets the project done, and I guess you could check off one less thing to have to worry about at that point. It was also the bigger part of it for putting in the additional sidewalk on Monroe was just to provide that pedestrian connection from the majority of the city at that point. Otherwise, Salt Springs kind of became more of a driven-based type park, so the idea was present a way that somebody could ride a bike down that way or just walk down there with their family at that point. And happy to answer any other questions that may come up.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate your time this evening. Additional questions either for our guest or for, City Engineer Fordyce. Go back to Mr. Gearbaugh.
Jeff, or maybe Ms. O'Toole knows, when does the Michigan DNR grant expire? I know it's been extended a number of times.
I believe it's June 30th. Scott actually has been tracking that pretty close.
June 30th.
Yep. June 30th of 2022? Yes.
Correct. And the DNR, it is possible to get another extension. That's a discussion we haven't even had with the DNR. So it's a possibility, but we were working towards trying to get everything buttoned up so that the grant doesn't expire.
Yeah, exactly. I want to make sure we get within this current deadline. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Mr. DeLorco, please.
Just real quickly, do the Brownfield grants come under an expiration date, or are they just out there for us?
So the Brownfield grant does not have a specific expiration date tied to it right now. The language that we adopted with the county does specifically allow for us to submit amendments, and there was sort of a verbal confirmation when they approved the original grant that we would be coming back once our costs were known. Now, again, we have not broached the subject directly with them about what sort of delay they would be willing to consider.
Anything further on the motion to simply acknowledge receipt? There appears to be none. So we will vote. It's been properly moved by Dillon, seconded by Kraus to acknowledge receipt of the September 15, 2021 memo. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Next up would be a motion then to approve an award or not to approve construction of the Salt Springs Park development and Monroe Street, a sidewalk to Folsom Incorporated in the amount of $269,389.65. Moved by Gearbaugh to approve and to award. Was that seconded by CO?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion, subsequent discussion on the motion? There appears to be none. Then we will proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by CO to approve and to award. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. We move on to new business item 21-178, construction engineering services, Salt Springs Park Development and Monroe Street Sidewalk Project. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 14th, 2021 memo from City Engineer Fordyce and to approve or award or not to approve the construction engineering services for Salt Springs Park Development Monroe Street Sidewalk Project to Midwest Consulting LLC in an amount not to exceed $41,800.
Move to acknowledge, approve, and award.
Second.
Okay, I'm going to go with CO as the mover to acknowledge receipt, to approve an award, and Gearbaugh as the second. Mr. Fordyce, would you like to begin? And then I will again defer to our guest from Midwestern Consulting.
Yeah, pretty standard procedure. Whenever we're doing a significant infrastructure project, we need to have inspection and material testing services. And in addition, this time, we're also getting additional grant administration assistance from Midwestern. All of these grants come with a fairly significant administrative load and some very particular requirements. So Midwestern will help us keep an eye on those. And they've always done an excellent job for us in the past.
Very good. Would our guest from Midwestern Consulting care to share some remarks?
Just very briefly, we're just excited to get another project constructed for you.
Very good. Why don't you hang tight at the podium in the event that there's some questions that it could be best addressed by you. Are there questions for either our guest or for City Engineer Fordyce? Ms. Dillon.
Thank you. So going back to my sidewalk, my crosswalk, as you plan, are you going to look at different avenues on where a crosswalk can be? Does it require studies? I know Mr. Fordyce had just mentioned that the design of the sidewalk is conducive to adding ramps, but I would like to see that we have an idea of what we're doing so that we can create this sidewalk as soon as possible, this crosswalk, excuse me. I do have great concern about people crossing from the west side to the east side of Monroe Street without having a viable crosswalk there, just assuming that two sidewalks make it okay.
Sure, absolutely. As Jeff mentioned, I had come up with a very basic concept that was similar to what's frequently used in a lot of towns in work zones, using temporary ramps. It's one of those, I understand, on the 80 side, there was a lot of soils that should not be touched, don't want to touch that along those lines. So my basic concept was possibly something that sits on the surface and doesn't actually disturb those. Definitely something we would need to look into further, as what Jeff mentioned was literally kind of a back of napkin sketch. So as he said, the proposed sidewalk that on the east side, anywhere along the commercial property, we can make a ramp tie into that pretty much anywhere. So at that point, it would just be a matter of determining how far along the 80th side we would need to. And we can make that work. In the interim, it's as to your point of if somebody walks up from Huntington Woods and they're kind of just visually seeing that as a crosswalk, Mr. Fordyce and I can look into, is there a way to even put in temporary striping, signage, something that'll just bring attention to it at that point. And that's fairly inexpensive and easy to do.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Additional questions for our guest or City Engineer Fordyce? Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
Jeff, if you could just discuss, or maybe even our consultant, $9,800 for grant administration, just for a $75,000 grant. Or is this for all of our requests, including the ones going to the county for the brownfield monies?
I'll defer to Scott on that a little bit, but I think it's the bulk of it is the DNR grant administration, and but there's also some coordination with the Brownfield grant in that amount.
Scott, would you like to elaborate?
Sure. It's exactly to your point. There is items with the brownfield of us coordinating with Tetra Tech because they'll be doing more of the environmental test or inspection on that item. The DNR also has a very long list of requirements that they want to see as part of that grant that you have to then follow, including different pay requests, different online submittals that you then make on it. They actually require a final as-built be performed of the project. And so those are the kind of costs that I lumped in with that particular line item.
Have they increased their requirements at this point in the last few years or more, or is this just something we've been standard with?
I do not believe this is any different than what they've had. However, they did come out with newer, there were certain items that changed, I think, at the start of this year and may have been lumped into this. So they have a very long, they actually have a procedure list written out that is what we were basing everything off of.
So basically, in the future, we need to accommodate for additional time and maintenance costs related to just grant management. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Girba. Additional questions, Mr. Seal?
Not a question, just a statement. In my personal experience in dealing with federal grants especially, there ain't no such thing as free money. We had the last time I remember seeing a grant, we had a Paperwork Reduction Act packet that was about an inch thick that came with the paperwork for the grant. So I certainly understand where that kind of cost comes from.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. I think we're good. Scott, thank you. Mr. Fordyce, thank you very much. Is there any subsequent discussion on the motion? There is none. Then we have a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded by Gearbaugh to approve and to acknowledge, approve, and award. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. The last item under new business is 21-179, a motion to approve East Belt Sewer Design and Engineering Service.
I'll move to approve it, but I would like to modify it to include the dollar amount that's involved of $221,800, I believe.
Number will be added to the motion without objection. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Kraus. Thank you. I'll get you on the next one, Mr. CO. Mr. Fordyce, do you care to comment?
Just, we worked with OHM for quite a while to develop this proposal. They've spent a lot of time digging into the SAW reports and some other analyses that were available, and a couple of email discussions and a couple of meetings to finalize this scope of work. It is a significant project. There's no doubt about that, and we're happy to have OHM on board and helping us with it. I think in the audience tonight, Matt Parks is there and Nick Barnett from OHM. So if we have any questions for them, they are there and available.
Gentlemen, just for the public's benefit, would one of you maybe give a 30-second to 1-minute overview of the scope of this project and the intended results once it's complete?
Good evening, Council. Matt Parks with OHM. Yeah, as Jeff said, we've been going through the SAW report. Really, it's just in a nutshell, it's a simplification of the existing system. It transports the sewer, brings it up to capacity to accommodate the 25-year, 24-hour storm, as well as moves it in a more efficient manner through the city. I think we outlined in the proposal, and there's an exhibit that was attached. Some of this existing sewer transverses through private property. Just from an overall maintenance and upkeep standpoint, it basically brings it all back into the public road right away, should lead to a more efficient transport, and then alleviate some of the capacity concerns in the system. So it's a combination of rerouting some existing sewer, rehabilitating and or replacement of the existing sewer, as some of it's basically being replaced in the same alignment, and essentially from north to south, starts up on North Maple Road, comes down past Clark Street, across Michigan Ave, which that's a challenging crossing there, and down south of Bemis. So like Jeff said, it's fairly complex. And on top of that, I think the city staff really did a good job at recognizing, and so we included in the scope not only just to do the sewer, because that's the main crux of the project and why we're doing it, but looking for advantages to including some road design, taking care of your water main at the same time. So it's going to be pretty impactful on the residents and the traveling public, but now is the time. If you're going to go through the pain of doing this sewer project, now's the time to take care of the rest of your infrastructure.
Very good. I appreciate that comment and the overview for the public's benefit. And as we've discussed in the past, this is a big ticket item. It comes with a significant cost, but it will benefit all of those businesses, a lot of heavy industry, and private property owners who are serviced by our East Belt, including the new Layer Farms development, which will be coming online in the ensuing years. So it is important, and I strongly in favor moving forward in approving the motion this evening. Let me defer to Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, since he was the one who removed this item from the consent agenda for council discussion. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Any additional questions for staff or our guests from OHM?
No real questions on it. My concern was just removing it from the consent agenda. I believe that certain project, even though we had a discussion as council that we would try and reduce some of the, I think, time that we spend on a lot of issues. And if they're approved in the budget, that we go ahead and put them in the consent agenda. I just have a concern of dollar amounts that exceed $50,000. And this is a large dollar amount, and I think it's a large project that should bear witness to have a discussion and actually be enumerated in the actual new business of our agenda. And that was the reason why I removed it. But going forward, I think this is excellent. We're moving forward. This was part of our idea that we were going to expand this side of the sewer system to get it back up to where we want it to be. And the only question I would have is, Jeff, is there any additional work that will happen on Michigan Avenue? I thought at one time we talked about a further replacement of a water line on something of that, or is that farther into the future?
Director Searles has been working on that project, and we're looking at a structural lining of that water main, basically from that intersection of Maple and Michigan to about the middle of the Phoenicia property. So that, I believe that is scheduled for the second half of this fiscal year, so springtime of '22.
But that's a lining, not a tear up of the road, correct?
Correct. Yeah. There will be some excavation involved, but they do need to dig down and expose the main and have access to it for the liner. And there'll be some valve replacements that require excavation as well, but not a large scale full trench.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions? Mr. Khmer-Sulak?
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions. How far south of Michigan Avenue is this project going to go? It's a little difficult to tell on the black and white of this, so hoping you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the diagram and we kind of lay it out in the opening paragraph, but from Michigan Ave down Bemis, and it looks like about another 1,000 feet, maybe south of Bemis, so I want to say roughly about 1,000 feet.
Okay. Does it line up with any, like Arbor Street, that's a new?
It does not go that far. It's about to the First Assembly of God Church.
Okay.
About halfway through.
All right, that's helpful, thank you. And then just for residents' understanding, this is something that we need sorely for our sewer capacity. And this doesn't have anything to do with our current some brown water issues that we've been having as of late. Is that correct?
Generally correct. Yeah. The crux of this is a sanitary sewer project, which has nothing to do with the rusty water issues. But we are at the same time replacing a significant length of water main that is, I don't know, almost 60 years old at this point. So that may have some impact on the rusty water issue. So our mains of that age are a ductile iron with a cementitious lining. So sometimes those types of mains will contribute some sediment or some rust to the water. So this will be a couple thousand feet of new water main.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Delorco, did you have questions, sir? Okay. Additional questions, Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. In the report, it talks about traffic analysis, and so I'm going to once again advocate for what I say every opportunity I can. Is there any opportunity to petition Mdot to make a designated left-hand turn signal at Maple Road? There were issues that were discussed in the past, and I know that we unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at the situation, don't meet the fatality criteria for that intersection. I still firmly, wholeheartedly believe that Maple and Industrial need designated left-hand turns. The roadway is there, it just needs to be a traffic signal. And I would love to see that explored if there's any opportunity. It's within sort of the scope of the project, but like I said, anytime that we're looking at an intersection, I'd like to kind of look at that. The other thing I wanted to ask about that I have a huge concern about is the time frame. This project is scheduled to start September 6th of '22. That's like the first week of school. This is going to be a major impact on Saline Middle School. And I hope that we can have some sort of coordination efforts with that school, because that's going to be a really big issue. That is really the main way to utilize that school building. And so I don't know if there's a way to change the time frame or to have discussions with the school about it, but I think that's really going to be a very important aspect of it. And the other thing when speaking of the schools is that I know that this project sort of stops at Maple Oaks, but maybe having a discussion with the schools, if you're changing roadways, is there an opportunity to expand that roadway to give them more skirting for entrance lanes? That road is becoming almost impassable to pass at certain times of the day. Because of its size and the volume of cars on it. So I don't know if there's any opportunity to include those within the scope of this project, but I would love to see that.
So certainly, if I,
Yep.
yeah, thank you. If in the current scope, there is that analysis of crash reports. So that's kind of the top level of a traffic safety review. So that'll let us know if there's anything that at that intersection that meets kind of basic criteria for an improvement. We could talk with OHM about trying to expand that a little bit and maybe look at that left turn analysis. I don't think MDOT's position will have changed on that because I don't think any of the background data has changed, but it is definitely worth taking a look at. As far as the schools go, yes, it's going to be a big deal for that school. But this construction process is probably along the lines of 12 months, maybe 18 months. So regardless of when we start it, it's going to have a big impact on them. But we certainly have included in this scope in our planning for what we call maintenance of traffic discussions and public meetings and talking to the stakeholders. That's a big part of this because it is going to be a significant traffic impact.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I just have one other question regarding the abandoned infrastructure. So is that abandoned in place?
Some of it will be abandoned, some of it, and a great example is that section that goes through the mobile home unit on the north side. Some of it will be abandoned, some of it will simply be bulkheaded off, some of it might need to be left in place because there's individual connections to it, so that's part of our analysis too. If we are truly abandoning it because we don't need it, depending on where it is, you can flowable fill it, you can cap it off, you can bulkhead it, we can leave it in place as long as it's not in danger of any other sinkholes. I know there's some videos of things that need to be reviewed, so I think for the most part, our idea is look at what doesn't need to be there, and if it can be abandoned in place or bulkheaded off, we will do so, but we would be working in close connection with the staff on what our options are there and looking at costs versus risk and whatnot on that.
Thank you both very much. I'm all set.
Any additional questions or discussion on the motion? There appears to be none. We do have a, thank you so much. We appreciate your time this evening. Jeff, thank you. We do have a motion on the floor to approve the East Belt Sewer Design and Engineering with the dollar amount. And the clerk, can the clerk assist me, Clerk Royal? Is it $280,000?
221,000.
220. State that one more time for the record, Mr. Gearbox.
$221,800.
Very good. We'll proceed to vote then. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you again. We move on to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is committee, commission, and task force reports from council members. Do we have any? Councilmember Kraus.
Thank you. So the Historic District Commission we're starting to plan our annual walking meeting, which will start, I can't remember exactly the starting location, more information to come, but that will be October 14th from 5 to 6:30. It's always kind of fun. The colors and if the weather cooperates, but we'd like to invite the public to keep that on their radar. And then the Healthcare Task Force, we have a large focus group that is occurring on 9/26 here in City Hall. It's Sunday at 2:30, and we just want to keep that on everyone's radar and continue to invite the public. We're gathering a lot of information for our Healthcare Task Force. We want to keep the momentum up. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Other commission, committee, or task force reports? Mr. Kamara Sulak.
Yes, thank you. For the DEI task force, we had a successful event and would like to thank the senior center for having the DEI over to talk. I also like to extend a thanks to Mr. CO for attending, and Mrs. Hess was there. So it was very well received. And then it is Hispanic Heritage Month. Oddly enough, it goes from September 15th to October 15th. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's awareness, and more information will be coming soon. And that's all. Thank you.
Very good. Any additional committee, commissioner, task force reports? Ms. Dillon.
Thank you. From the Parks Commission, I just wanted to let everybody know that the Fall Nature Walk series is beginning again. There is the first walk will be this Thursday. They all begin at 6 p.m. They vary from park to park. This week is Colony Park, and the themes are Michigan rodents. There are nocturnal animals, winter birds, and Winter Wonderland hike. They are the last Thursday, the third Thursday, of the month. You can register at salinerec.com or by calling the rec center. Thank you.
Very good. If there are no further commission, committee, or task force reports, how about reports or other announcements? Mr. Gearbaugh.
I just want to put a promotion out for harvest time at Rentschler Farm. That'll be October 3rd from 12 to 4th. We're intending to have actually a cow, hopefully, for milking, and a calf, and a few other animals. We'll have pumpkin painting and hay rides, so hope to see everyone out there. It's going to be one of our better attended events that we like to do at the time, and it's the closing of the museum at this time of the year, so hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Seo, did you have your hand up for a report or other announcement?
Yes, Your Honor, I just wanted to thank everybody for their participation this weekend in Oktoberfest. See a number of people that's sitting here in this very room who helped participate to make it a successful event, and all of you who came down, and even Mr. Longmore and his beautiful bride were down there reporting on it and encouraging people to come down. So thank you all. It's a great community event. For the first time in our history, the Saline Lindenberg booth sold out everything that we had to sell. So it's a big help to us.
Mr. Kamara Sulak.
Yeah, just real quick. Mr. Steele stole some of my thunder, but I also wanted to say thank you for all the volunteers for Saline Main Street and everybody that attended. It was a very successful event, and it really shows a lot of people from outside of Saline always attend and attended again, and I think that's one of the things that really brings us together and makes Saline special is having the Oktoberfest. So a big shout out to Saline Main Street. Thank you.
Very good. Other reports or announcements? City Manager O'Toole.
The city is still looking for volunteers for our sub pump flow monitoring as part of our sanitary sewer evaluation study. We really need just a handful of residents with homes aged 1974 or older. If anyone's interested in participating, again, does not need to be that old of a sub pump, just need homes of that age to participate. They can contact me directly.
Very good. Well, I have four reports or announcements. One, a press release was disseminated last week along with formal invitations to any and all small business operators within the corporate limits of the city of Saline. An invitation is also extended to any would-be entrepreneurs who are interested in starting a small business in Saline. We will be having our annual small business luncheon a week from this Thursday at 11:30 here at Saline City Hall. Invitations to council members, the formal invite, was placed in your mailbox subsequent to the packets going out last week. So please look for those. The event is free. Space, however, is limited, and you are encouraged to RSVP as soon as you are possibly able to our PR generalist Sarah Massey. Also wanted to confirm for the record, and this was inferred at last week's meeting, but GBA has rescinded their offer for Lot 20A. Their earnest money has been returned, and Lot 20A is back. Lot 20A along East Michigan Ave is back on the market. Interested parties should direct their inquiries to Tony Caparisi, our listing agent from Swisher Commercial Realty. And I would note that if you're interested in bringing services and amenities to the Saline community that would enrich our area, I strongly encourage you to take a look at that lot. We are eager to work with you to sell that parcel and to see it developed. Also wanted to confirm that the Celtic Festival Fall event that was scheduled for this coming weekend has been canceled, but the group's efforts have been redirected to planning and orchestrating a very successful event in 2022, which will culminate in the 25th anniversary of the Saline Celtic Festival. And then my final item, and this came up sort of organically from a conversation I had with Councilmember Dillon last week, and this is a follow-up to our council retreat a couple weeks ago. I just wanted to confirm, is there consensus to forego the delivery of council packets and agendas and simply place those documents in your mailbox in addition to having the city clerk email a copy of the agenda and the support material as soon as it's ready? Is everybody good with that? Okay. Then effective at the next meeting, Clerk Royal, packets will no longer be delivered. They'll just be placed in their mailbox. Council members can then pick them up at their convenience. I think that exhausts our reports or other announcements, so we will transition to item 3, which is the extension tree at 247 Nichols Drive. I did have a conversation about this subject with the city manager today, so Ms. O'Toole, can I put you on the spot and sort of have you debrief council on the conversation we had earlier this morning?
Certainly. So after discussing the issue with staff and Mayor Marl, I don't personally feel that it necessarily warrants a change to our existing policy, but if council was so inclined, that is why the appeal process does exist. We could suggest that it was reasonable to consider removal based on the root size and the proximity to the foundation. But again, the existing policy does put the ball in your court if you would like us to address it based on that consideration.
So again, just to confirm, it is reasonable then to have this group proceed with a motion to remove the tree at city expense due exclusively to the fact that the roots are in effect disrupting the foundation of the home, or have the potential to.
Yes,
Okay.
that would be the justification that we recommend if you so choose to consider that.
Okay. Are there questions for the city manager or DPW director on this issue? Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
Can the roots be removed that are affecting the foundation, or is this a question that it would kill the tree?
DPW Director Searles?
To answer that, we could remove the roots, but they would come right back, right? If we went in there with any kind of grinder, we would grind that up, that would loosen up the soil and actually promote new root growth, and it would probably be just a matter of time before it was right up against it again, probably with more roots.
And the second question, we talk about how our policy is in terms of allowing a tree to be put out in the lawn extension. Is it still the policy that that decision is made by the homeowner in terms of replacement tree? So if we remove this tree, then the homeowner has the authority to say no to the tree being replaced, a new tree being put into that location.
I know that's been past practice. We have removed trees, and the homeowner has asked not to have one put back. We'll plant a tree anywhere we can, so we'll use our inventory somewhere.
Just the concern with that, if that continues to happen as a result of all these maples, I talk about Canterbury, Oak Creek on those areas, all of these silver maples are at that point, and they're that big, and preventing this type of problem is that, do we want to see a street clear-cutted of all these trees and not have the ability to put a tree back in there from the perspective of no homeowner wanting it because of the issue related to potential sewer lines? So that's a question I think this council needs to talk about.
And it may be addressed in the actual policy. I just know in practice, in the past, we've not replaced them where homeowners didn't want them just because our limited funds available for trees. we always had more need than we had dollars. So it actually may be a policy thing. If you want, I'll find that out and email the group.
That'd be great.
And I think also a clear recommendation of what trees may not be planted in the lawn extensions. I think that's the issue of what trees are clearly not a threat in terms of the type of root concerns that maples present.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Deputy DPW Director Bennett has that, because I've inquired about replacing an extension tree that was removed when my grandfather still lived in the house, and there were a list of suitable options, which I would pay for and then DPW would plant.
And it has been updated. That list of approved species has been updated recently.
Okay.
We have a pretty good inventory.
The only one other thing I'd say is that I'm concerned that I'm seeing a lot of maples dying in town just in the last 6 months. And so I don't know if we have another blight issue coming on, but it looks like even the regular Norway maples and some of the other maples are starting to die that we didn't anticipate. So hopefully that's not another issue like the ash trees, but it could be a concern. Thank you.
Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. I guess this would be for the city manager. Can you talk through the process right now? Because I came to the dais thinking that it really was beyond the scope of this body to make this decision, because this is a staff decision. We make policy decisions. So if we're recommending removal of a tree, I would like some clarification of that.
Certainly. So the existing policy is the city does not remove right-of-way trees that are healthy. This is a healthy tree. Our policy answer to the resident was we do not remove it. Now, any city policy, residents have the option to appeal to council. And that is where we are now. You, as council, have the discretion to say, either we let the policy stand as is, we make a change to the policy, or we make an exemption based on X reasoning. Those are the options in front of you. Either you defer back to the existing policy, discuss a policy change, or make a one-time exemption. I would just caution, if you do make an exemption, it be very specific in nature. We do not want to make exemptions for any specific reason. We could possibly make one for this being a potential foundational threat.
Okay, that's what I was getting at, was that I don't want to start one-offing. And I'm very concerned that if we do this, then this is going to be a habitual thing, that it's going to come to us. So I'm trying to figure out, should this be a policy change then, to where there's a directive for staff to follow? I mean, does the policy need to be changed to incorporate some level of variable?
I mean, my position, and certainly Director Searles, feel free to weigh in, is that we would like to continue with the existing policy and not allow exemptions. If a tree is healthy, we would not remove it.
I agree, and this is our policy in Saline is pretty consistent with other areas that are, tree city and tree conscious. That canopy is nice and desirable.
Right, no, exactly. And I'm also very fearful of what this could do cost-wise. I mean, do we know what it would cost to remove this tree?
I did send a cost estimate.
About 1,800?
Yeah.
Okay. Because like Mr. Gearba said, if you look through that neighborhood, there are quite a few trees that are similar in size and, character. And so I don't know whether these are things that are going to keep coming back to us. So I just would rather have some clarification. I appreciate what the city manager has to say, and I'd like some consensus from the dais.
Well, I can tell you my opinion, which is I think what Ms. O'Toole and I discussed today seems reasonable, appropriate in this circumstance, which is, yes, the tree is healthy. It's probably a bit large for that geographic location, and that in and of itself does not justify removal. But I'm not aware of any silver maple in that vicinity in the Rolling Meadows subdivision that has sprawling roots to that extent, that have the potential to disrupt and deteriorate the home's foundation. So on that basis and that basis alone, I think it would be appropriate to remove Mr. Gearbox?
Just one other question. If we, based, supporting the policy as it is, it does not prevent the homeowner from removing the roots within their right-of-way on the other side of the sidewalk, correct?
No, it doesn't.
And that could potentially kill the tree, but we would not hold that individual responsible for that.
No.
Thank you.
Mr. Kamara Sulek?
Thank you. Mr. Gerbach asked part of my question. I'm concerned as far as the extent to these roots are to the foundation of the house and affecting the safety, soundness, and structural integrity of the foundation, and that this sounds somewhat unusual. But help me understand, is our policy pretty common or consistent with other municipalities?
Yes.
Okay. I just wonder what others have done in the past for a situation like this, or that's even more advanced.
In a very general statement, it's not very common for roots to travel that far. Generally, you look at the canopy, maybe a little bit outside of the canopy, the drip canopy. That's usually the extent of the roots. Silver maples go a little further. This one went a lot further.
Well, and to that point, if I may, I've been doing this and sitting at this dais for 12 years. I've never experienced an issue comparable to this.
Yeah, these roots have traveled pretty far.
Because I feel I'm sensitive to the plight of the homeowner, because this is pretty significant. Foundation damage and cost to cure is very material. So that's important to me. I do want to make the best decision for what we're going to do with this policy. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Very good. I apologize. Mr. Puckett, the property owner, is in the audience this evening. I wanted to acknowledge him. Mike, is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, I've just always, like the DPW director said, the tree was there when we moved in. And it's just kept on going and going and going. And when I've never said it wasn't healthy. I've always said, well, it could be healthy. And I had 2 arborists tell me it was healthy, but they said same thing. They said they'd never seen a root structure span that far, but they said, you're going to have foundation problems. They guarantee it. Because you can see the canopy is over to that corner of the house, and that's right where those roots are sitting. There's 2 roots in there that are that big around.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Additional comments from the dais? Then the chair would be happy to, if somebody would like to offer a motion from the floor, as long as it's appropriately worded, the chair would be happy to entertain that.
I'd make a motion that the city at its expense remove this tree from the lawn extension at
247 Nichols.
247 Nichols. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, been properly
Wait a
moved.
minute, let me finish. Because the roots are potentially endangering the foundation of the structure at that location.
Okay, that motion is appropriately worded. Mr. Kamara Sulek, with Mr. Seo's additional language, are you still comfortable being the second?
I'm more comfortable. Thank you.
Very good. Is there discussion on the motion? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just to clarify for future, as the city manager had indicated, her concern being that we make this specific, I'd like to have that be identified that in the future, there has to be some professional assessment done in terms of destroying this foundation, so that we have something that's evidently clear that this is that concern, and otherwise, it'd be subjected to whatever the homeowner's decision was.
I agree. I don't think that we should extend a blanket opportunity to file exemptions. My recommendation would be that one could be considered if and only if either the city arborist or an independent arborist assesses the root conditions to be a significant foundational threat.
I think that would be an appropriate addendum to the policy, to make sure that there's an objective voice confirming
And maybe a foundation expert.
that. Yep, that too. That too. Apart from an arborist, I would be fine with that. So, yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Kamara Sulek.
just a quick question. I like that as far as professional, and so that would be a signed document by that professional, not just my landscaping professional said that it's going to gave my house in.
We need something in writing.
Right, something in writing and proof, to justify. Thank you.
Yep. Ms. Dillon?
So just for clarification, the city will remove the tree from the lawn extension. It does not go onto private property at all to remove any growth whatsoever that's there?
No.
Okay, just for clarification, thank you.
Any additional discussion on the motion? We have a motion properly moved by CO, seconded by Kamara Sulak to remove the tree, noting its potential impact to the foundation at 247 Nichols Drive. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And Mr. Puckett, either the city manager's office or DPW will be in touch with you with more specifics.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Our last item we move on, that's listed as an enumerated discussion item, is water quality. Ms. O'Toole, can I begin with you and DPW Director Searles with an update from where things stood last week?
Certainly. So we've had an opportunity to meet as a group, myself, Director Searles, new Superintendent Briggs, and Foreman Marion, to discuss what we believe are some of the current exacerbating factors, as well as our upcoming hydrant flushing schedule. There are a number of issues that go into what may cause brown water in an individual home. We did identify that there were a few instances of fire flow testing of hydrants that were specifically near some of the more egregious cases of brown water or blackish-looking water. Thankfully, that work is complete, and so we're starting to see those cases clear up. But we've also put together a preliminary schedule for hydrant flushing that commences August 4th, and will probably take us through the mid to early late part of October.
I think you meant October 4th, not August 4th.
Oh, no, I'm going backwards in time now.
Okay.
We would have gotten rid of the
Would
problem.
have resolved the issue. Yeah. Mr. Searles, thank you, City Manager O'Toole. Director Searles, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Just to piggyback on city manager's comments, it was a good meeting with production. It looks like we were going to get some more communication with water treatment. We're going to try and work on some of the data points. We did identify, like Colleen mentioned, that the fire department had a flow test. We had a flow test. So we're going to try and work more with the fire department as well on communicating, because some of the more densely complained about areas definitely were affected by those hydrant flow tests. We're going to work from the DPW side at doing better at record keeping and data logging, taking care of something so that we could have more look backs. I know they're working with replacement of the green sand in the filters. There's a couple things to look forward to that could alleviate this going forward as an issue. We do know that we had about 15% or a little over 15% growth on this system in a little over 10 years. So we have a lot more users than we used to. So probably moving a little bit more velocity and maybe not making that much more water than we used to. So.
Mr. Searles, and I mentioned this in an email update to City Council late last week, and the City Manager and I articulated my suggestion to the City Manager earlier today when I was in the office. But if there is any way to fast track our flushing schedule and have that begin sooner than October 4th, I think that would be ideal. I understand that you and your department have other projects, tasks on your agenda, including cemetery cleanup, but from my perspective, clear water would be a top priority. And it ought to be a top priority moving forward. So again, you don't have to confirm any details this evening, but if there's a way to fast track that and have that begin either later this week or early next week, I think that would be ideal for our residents and for our business owners. I do want to confirm for the record, and I know you returned a number of phone calls, but I think between the city manager, myself, and our PR generalist, Sarah Massey, we probably called, do you recall how many were on that Excel spreadsheet?
56.
56 individuals who submitted responses or submitted a water quality survey. The initial survey did not ask for an email address. And while on the surface that would seem problematic, I actually think calling people was warmly received. because you could actually have a conversation with them instead of just receiving a generic email. So I called a third of that list. I had very good conversations with people. I did talk about the fact that routine testing is done in accordance with state and federal statute. At both the well, the treatment plant, and at rotating locations in our distribution system. I did mention the forthcoming comprehensive flushing initiative, and also offered to people that we've always provided free testing of water, but we've streamlined that process, made it easier, and that those containers are available at the front counter of City Hall. Instructions are inside the container, and they can be retrieved during normal business hours between 8:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And we've had several people take advantage of that. And I believe that we return results within 48 or 72 hours. So it's a pretty fast turnaround, which I think people appreciate. Is there anything I'm missing on this issue?
Well, as I've talked to a lot of the residents on callbacks, a lot of it is kind of gone, right, by the time we get back to them, which is pretty typical. Maybe a little bit more public education on their hot water tanks. I heard a couple people tell me that they actually turned on both faucets to flush more water. Well, they pulled that discoloration in their hot water tank.
Right.
Not many people actually knew that they needed to annually flush and drain their tank. So maybe a little bit more, and we could get that out through social media, that they can help themselves in their homes too.
Yeah, I think a fact sheet along with a video would be appropriate, Director Sherrills, either during or subsequent to the comprehensive flushing program, to say, one, we're either in the process of completing this initiative or it has been complete, and as a result, you should notice an impact in your water quality and clarity. Subsequent to that, there are steps that you can take as a business owner or homeowner to improve the quality of your water long-term, including, if you come home from a 2.5-week vacation, it might be a little brown and cloudy for a finite period of time. To your point, draining a water heater once a year. I've been a homeowner for 16 years. I've never done that once. And based on my own research, that's not only good for your water quality, it extends the life of your water heater.
Absolutely.
So I think there are some pieces that we need to do a better job disseminating and educating our constituents on.
Oh, and Mayor, one more thing. I believe we're going to be able to give daily updates that we could put on the city's website of where we're at with the flushing program as we work through it. Okay. So they'll know in the morning where we were the previous night.
Yeah. One last thing. The samples that residents and business owners have submitted, I don't know if you have that data this evening. Can you make sure to disseminate that to council? My understanding is that the samples that we have evaluated thus far, we have not found any contaminants, any reason to be concerned. We can conclude that the drinking water is safe. We're all drinking it this evening, and that you're safe to bathe in it, to wash things, et cetera.
Correct, yeah. None of these samples that we've returned indicate anything that gives us cause for alarm. I believe one of the 9 samples we returned was a little high for hardness, but otherwise, all samples came back within our operational parameters and under the state compliance limits.
Very good. Okay, let's do a round of questions. I'm sure all of you have comments and maybe some questions for staff as well. Let me start with Councilmember Kraus. We'll work our way around the dais. I'll end with Mr. Delorco, and then remind me at the subsequent meeting when we do questions, I'll start with you and end with Councilmember Kraus. Dawn, please.
Thanks. I guess my only concern, I was talking with Ms. O'Toole before I actually left on vacation, is I think the city sometimes, it's a proactive communication issue. And that's been the big, like this to me, it happens. I mean, I'm not too worried about the water. I've read the reports, but getting it out there in front of it, because in the meantime, everything festers online, and then there's, all of a sudden we go from brown water to PFAS to our children are going to grow 6 arms, and it goes quickly. So I think that as time allows, getting ahead of the communication, getting that out on the city's website, is super helpful. So just be in front of the communication, just because you guys are out there doing the work. They don't know that. They think you're, in fact, one comment online was something about city staff falling asleep after lunch. They get tired, which luckily Mr. Girbaugh and I both came to the rescue of staff on that, because that's ridiculous and we can't allow that to happen. So letting them know that you're doing the work, out there can cut off some of the problems. That's my only, but great work getting ahead of it.
Mr. Commissioner, thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Councilmember Kraus.
Yes, thank you. So for next year, for the flushing, are we moving it up to are we able to move it up sooner to the beginning of September, or what are we looking at?
We're gonna move it 2 weeks forward, because I think 2 weeks forward this year would have been great.
Maybe a little bit sooner, just to be measure of safety, especially.
We would really be doing a disservice if we don't let the irrigation go off, because if we flush too soon, we're gonna still have that disturbance of high demand, and we're not gonna be getting it, making it through winter.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Commander-Sulak, if you'll indulge me, because Mr. Searles, I believe you mentioned this in the press release that went on Friday. You believe, and I think staff in general believes, that if folks were to reduce in the next 7 to 10 days their use of irrigation sprinkler systems, that would ultimately benefit and improve the success, if you will, of our comprehensive flushing initiative. So I would ask to those who are watching at home or who may be reading about this meeting in the coming days, the weather is cooling. We're going to get actually a decent amount of rain, or so they're prognosticating in the next couple days. You would be doing your community a service if you could reduce your use of water to irrigate your lawn in the next couple days. I don't think that's that much of an inconvenience. This isn't a mandate. It's not a fiat, or it's not we're not demanding anybody do this, but we are asking politely that you reduce your use of water to water lawns and to use an irrigation system. So my apologies.
Thank you. And can you briefly explain the hydrant flow test that you mentioned earlier?
For certain business uses, they need to know the flow test of the hydrant near the building for compliance issues for irrigation, overhead irrigation, and how much water is there to fight for that purpose or that use. So you have to go out and run 2 hydrants full bore, or fully open, because we're trying to see exactly how much water will come out of that hydrant static and how much will come out of it dynamic, meaning in use. And that's a requirement and pretty typical. Everyone has to do it. Our notification process needs to get a little bit better on that when we have a flow test.
I think that'll help tremendously. And I'd also like to say thank you for all the work, all the extra time that I'm sure you and Ms. O'Toole and other staff has spent on this. And obviously, it's very important to have clean and clear water.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. CO, any comments or questions?
Just having lived in the community now for about 45, 46 years, I understand that occasionally there will be cloudy water. And we've come to not necessarily expect it on a regular basis, but when it occurs, it doesn't necessarily make us think that there's something tragically wrong with the water supply. And my wife knows to run the water, for a few minutes to make sure it clears before she does her laundry if she senses that there's cloudy water in the laundry tub when she starts to do the wash and so on. I've never heard that there was contaminated water in our system. I understand why people get upset when they see the dark water. I understand why people question, especially given the experience throughout the state of Michigan and that has occurred. I guess I would just encourage people to do the kinds of things we're talking about. If you see cloudy water, you run it for a few minutes, it doesn't clear up, maybe then call and report it. And I'm sure you folks will send Ryan Marion or somebody out to the house to check to see what may or may not be going on there. I've for years now been flushing my hot water heater, and that has helped a lot. So, and like you say, Mr. Mayor, it increases the length of life of the water heater too. So take some proactive steps. One other thing you might want to do if you do get cloudy water is unscrew the little screen, if you have one on your faucet, and clean that out too, because sometimes water or rust or dirt dirt or rust will collect in there, and that needs to be cleaned out too. So.
And maybe just to add to that, the best place to flush the water is in your bathtub cold tap. Most water moving, and there's no aerator. So and then if you do have one point of use that's discolored, check your aerator screen on your faucet.
All right, good.
That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Councilmember Dillon?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Searles. Thank you to the city manager, to the mayor, for making this such a priority. I think there were a lot of valid concerns and a lot of scared people. As Mr. CEO said, Michigan is unfortunately known for some contaminated water. And I think people can go off very quickly in panic. I do want to piggyback on what Ms. Kraus had said, which is being a little bit more proactive in the way the city gets information out to people so that we're clear and concise about, so that we're setting an expectation. And also that the other side of that is that people are telling us when there's a problem. You can write all you want on social media. It doesn't necessarily mean somebody from the city is going to see it. So if you're having an issue, please fill out the water quality form. That we know is going to the right place, and it's going to collect, a data point, and so that people are going to be able to do it. I do want to make sure that we clarify, because the city manager had talked about October 4th. The mayor's now asking if we can push that up. We've talked about daytime flushing, nighttime flushing. I just want to make sure that we're sending out a very clear message of what our plan is. So once we figure out what that is, we can disseminate out a message so that everyone understands what it is. I really appreciate that you're indicating that we can tell people what areas we will be in, what areas we have done, and sort of have a tracking map so that people can understand what it is and where it is.
If I may quickly, Councilmember Dillon, I apologize for interrupting, but I believe from my conversation earlier today with the city manager, and you, Mr. Searles, you can confirm this, we are going to stick with nighttime flushing. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that detail we can confirm. Your point about the actual start date and where we're at geographically, I think is well made, and we will do our best to make sure that that information goes up online and on social media, and of course encourage all of us to share it through our networks as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Pro Tem Girba.
Just a couple clarifications. When you mentioned the fire flow test, is that coordinated with our fire department, or are these private contractors doing it without necessarily speaking with you all?
We do work with private contractors, and they do coordinate through us. I know the fire department has had some flow tests, and I don't know if that was for their personal use or for a business, but usually the business comes through DPW. But we're going to work closer with the fire department for, just this reason, so we can notify.
We haven't had instances where private contractors have been tapping into our fire hydrants or doing something without your knowledge, or?
No.
Just want to clarify that. And then the only other one, if it would be helpful, I think we talk about water breaks and so forth, communicating those, because I know even though they may be small, putting that out there as part of our communication would be helpful, because even the water break at the school got a lot of mileage out of that one, and just understanding whose responsibility is, where is it, that kind of thing would be helpful. But again, as I want to repeat, just like the other members of council, thank you for what you've been doing. I think we've been addressing a number of issues, even as part of the ad hoc committee that we have together, and looking at all these aspects. And I believe a lot of it is just getting you all together to talk about the process and understanding in the past what worked, what hasn't worked, and really looking at ways of improving it, whether it's through changing how you manage valves, pressure, or whatever else. I think that will finally get us to a point where we can have a stability in the system. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Girba. Councilmember Delorico.
Yeah, I want to second that idea and sentiment. I want to thank you, Mr. Searles, for a swift response to dealing with the public fallout from what has occurred here, both yourself, your staff, and the city manager. I think there was a concerted effort to take the situation seriously, and we're putting the right measures in place to ensure that we can avoid this from happening in the future. Shifting up the timeline that we take on the process of flushing and irrigating the system is going to be important in preventing this from happening moving forward.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Searles, thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work on this, and I know we'll revisit the issue at a future meeting as well.
Thank you.
If there's nothing further to be discussed under the discussion portion of tonight's agenda, we come to our second public comment period. Under the Open Meeting Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Again, I'll defer first to the city clerk. Clerk Royal, did we receive any communiques in advance or during tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their comments read at this time? The record will reflect none. If there are citizen comments, you may please approach the podium. You will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. On my way home tonight on Harris Street, I don't know if it's Crestwood, but there is a large project going, and I wonder if anybody has any time schedule of when that is going to be completed. And that, because I'm sure that'll help me going up. I tried to avoid it. The other thing is, years ago, when Universal was on Monroe Street, it was zoned industrial. And then it got changed zoning to residential for some condos to be built there. Of course, it didn't happen. And we talked tonight about a lot of contaminated soil. And I'm wondering, at one point, does the council or the zoning change from residential, which it never should have been? Thank you.
Thank you. Additional citizen comments?
Good evening. My name is Pat Wanty. I own 2 properties here in the city of Saline. And I think tonight, what you've done with the extension tree policy, we've had a policy in place, and I think you've opened a can of worms. So you say that a foundation evaluation has to be done. Was this done on this property? Was anything done, arborist, documentation, anything like that? I know a lot of homes in the Rolling Meadows that have the trees in that way. And I think, you know, it's gonna cost us a lot of money. $1,800 here. 10 years ago, there was a diseased tree next to me, and the city said the policy is if a landowner does not have the money or won't take it down, arborists will come in from the city of Saline and take it down. City told me that, well, we don't have the money to do that because it was a foreclosed property. So there's nothing they could do about it. So I think you're making these ordinances and policies, but you aren't following through with them. You know, like the weed control and industrial parks and things like that. It's still, the weeds are tall, but we still are just letting it go. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Are there any additional citizen comments? Let me defer momentarily to the city manager. Mrs. Hess made reference to construction activity on Crestwood. I'm not aware of any. Can you or the DPW director confirm any details?
I'm not aware.
Maybe referring to Harris and Hillcrest, I believe.
Are you referring to
Hillcrest.
Harris and Hillcrest? Okay. City manager can update you on that.
Certainly, yes. So we're in the kind of halfway point of the construction work there. I believe the timeline is concrete work should be completed by the beginning of October, and we should begin to see asphalt go in that second and third week of October. So the goal would be to have the project substantially completed by the third week in October and hopefully fully completed by the end of October.
And just confirm that crews will also be transitioning from that contractor to the vicinity of Monroe Street and Macon to complete the Huntington Woods connecting sidewalk.
Correct. The current schedule starts for the Macon Road sidewalk to commence October 4th.
Very good. Okay. One last opportunity. Are there any citizen comments? The record will reflect there are none. Is there any other business to come before Saline City Council this evening? No? Then please note our upcoming meetings on October 4th and 18th. And with that, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:27 p.m.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Kamira Sulak to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kraus. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.